Hello, this is Brandon, also known as Crazy6. I'm here with DeepBrain Chain. We're going to discuss validators. Which one should I pick? How much am I going to make? Help me. How does this work? These are actually pretty popular questions right now. A lot of the community has moved their DBC bag onto dbcwallet.io, which enables them to stake. And of course, there's going to be a lot of questions. So there are validators and nominators. Validators create the blocks and earn rewards each day. Nominators can nominate validators, and most validators actually need this. To be able to be a validator for each day, the validator has to be in the top 31 of all validators in total stake to be selected. Most validators don't have enough of their own DBC to make the list. Some do, and you'll see them on there. It'll say own stake, and they'll have 20 million or 15 million or who knows how much. Most have the average amount, maybe a couple million, something like that. They need nominators to nominate their validator, so the total stake gets them on the top 31 list for the day. They make the list, they earn rewards, and in turn, those rewards are shared with the the nominator. So nominators depend on validators to get reward. Validators depend on nominators to make the list and get reward. The total reward that a validator can earn should be about the same for all validators for that day. It varies a little bit, but it's about probability, and one validator does not really earn much more on average than another validator. Now, how that split does change. So if you want to imagine for a moment that the combined other stake and own stake for a validator equals about 10 million. Let's say you have 1 million, you've bonded it, and you've nominated that validator. So of that 10 million, 1 million is yours. Well, you have 10% of the overall stake. Therefore, you're going to get 10% of the reward. If that validator earns 15,000 DBC each day that you've nominated that validator, you're going to get 10% of that. That's 1,500 DBC. However, there's also commission to take into consideration. You'll see some validators have 0%, some have 10, 5, and so on. So of that 1,500 DBC that you earned, commission's deducted from that. If they have 0% commission, then you keep your whole 1,500. If they have a 10%, then 150 DBC is going to go to the validator, and you are going to get 1,350 DBC. Now, that's where trust and risk comes in. 0% sounds great. I get to keep all my DBC if there's a low amount of stake. If they only have 5 million staked and they make the list and there's 0% commission, I earn more. However, you need to make sure it's a validator you trust. You need to make sure that they're putting their own stake in there. And sometimes a validator might have a nominator account that they're staking to their own validator. I do that. That way I have flexibility. If I want to turn my validator off for a little while, I can easily nominate other validators. All things to consider. There's also slashing to consider. So slashing happens when a validator does something bad. We haven't really seen or heard of a good example within DBC of a validator doing something bad that they got slashed. In some substrates, just going offline when you're a selected validator for the day can get you slashed. I've seen validators go offline for weeks at a time, and they didn't get any slashes. But let me explain. A validator can set their validator to be in kind of a rest mode where they're not selected each day. So there's no slashing. There's no slashing for the validator. There's no slashing for the nominators. But if the machine just loses connection or shuts down and they haven't changed the configuration for it to be not selected each day, then it can get selected, but it's not producing any blocks. It's not getting any rewards. The nominators aren't getting any rewards, and so on. So that's also something you want to watch for. If you look at the points and it's in the middle of the day and there's a validator that doesn't have points right here, that means they're offline. They're not doing any work. They're not producing any blocks. That doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And if a validator goes offline for a half a day or a full day, it's not a bad sign. Uh, they might be getting alerts but unable to do something about it. Hopefully they're going to get to their machine, they're going to fix the issue, and they're back in business. What you do want to watch for is a validator that goes offline for weeks at a time. I saw one that was off for 3 weeks, selected every day because they had a lot of stake, and they were offline for 3 weeks. So no rewards for them, no rewards for their nominators. However, there was also no slashing, so nobody lost their DBC over it. That's something that can be set up based on the substrate, and that's apparently DBC has selected not to slash people that are offline, not to slash validators that are offline. Things the validator could get slashed for is if they're intentionally trying to do something bad. I don't know what that would be. I don't have the technical knowledge to understand, but I would assume trying to, hack the system, get information out of it, take some more DBC than they should, something along those lines. And if that happens, they are slashed. Minor slashes usually end up in losing the reward for the day. So if I'm a nominator and I'm connected to a validator that gets slashed with a minor slashing, I might just lose whatever rewards I would have had that day. If I'm a nominator that is connected to a validator that did something very bad, they can slash your bag. Not just the validators, but the nominator's bag. This is where you want to make sure you're selecting validators you trust. They have a good reputation. They're online. They're around enough. They have an identity. It's unlikely that they just came online, entered the system, and are just there to do something bad and get out. Now that is really what we're here to answer. How do you know? How do we know what validators are here for long term versus, or even just new, or might actually be out to do something harmful? I guess the answer is you don't know, but we're going to do our best to dig in and figure it out. Give ourselves a little bit of confidence. So on dbcwallet.io, if I go to targets, we're going to see a list of the validators. Now, when I'm looking at selecting my own validator, you can see the no 20+% commission is on. Right now, that's a good idea. There's a lot of validators offering 0%, 5%, 10%. Those are pretty reasonable percentages. More than that with the current list means either they have their own bag that's big enough that they can get selected without nominators, or they just don't realize they're not really doing anything in the best interest of the nominators. I've seen some validators that have about 1 million of their own stake, and they've collected nominators with bags equaling 10, 15 million, and then all of a sudden they raise their commission to 100%. And unknowingly, the nominators are not getting any rewards. So you need to look at the stats, look at the validator, make sure they're not trying to mess around with that. You want to, if you click over here on the little stats thing, you can see a recent history of commission. This validator that I randomly selected on has been at 0% across the boards. If you go look around, you will find validators that are at 0%, and then they pop up to 80%. They pop down to 0% for a few days, and then they pop up to 100% for a week, and then back down. And they're maintaining nominators by keeping a low percentage, but then popping up and keeping all the rewards for themselves for a week, a few days, whatever it is. And you just want to watch for that. That is not in your best interest. And honestly, it's not even in the validator's best interest. They want to get selected each day, and they have a smaller bag. They need nominators. In the end, it's going to come down to risk tolerance. You can see how much you potentially could earn nominating different validators, and they might have different levels of risk. If the validator has a large bag of their own stake, or you can clearly see they have a nominator account that they're staking to their own validator, then they have a ball in the game. If they have an identity set on the system, then they're starting to identify themselves, although we need to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So just because the first one I see has a return of a large amount because they have a lower stake, their commission's low, doesn't mean I want to go for them personally. If you're more open to risk and you think the short-term rewards are worth the risk of an unknown validator with no identity and a lower amount of stake, then that could be the right answer for you. If you want to be a little bit more conservative and less risk, then you're going to want to pick one that has a larger stake, both own and total stake, because other nominators are trusting them or sticking with them. And the commission percentage, it takes time, it takes resources to run a validator. So 0% is great, 5% is not bad, 10% is not bad. That makes it worth maintaining a validator and actually paying attention to it. So let's talk about the identity of validators for a moment. I can filter right here at the top only with an identity. DBC has many validators that have set an identity, but they haven't finished the full process. And it's not really on the validators, it's more so we just have not evolved as much as, say, Polkadot and some of the substrates that have been staking a little bit longer. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to switch over to the Polkadot screen, to the Polkadot app. And here we can see it looks very much the same. We have validators, we can see their percentages, we can see the total stake and their own stake. The numbers are different because we're using Polkadot here, but it is very similar overall. The main difference you'll see is there are validators that have set their identity in the same way they have in the DBC wallet. They have a little dash here and they're gray. But what you see on Polkadot is we have gray ones with this other icon, a little link. We have green icons. We have green checks. What does all this mean? What this means is a validator with a green check has submitted their identity to a registrar. They staked a small amount of DBC and paid a fee, and a registrar looked at their identity information, email, Twitter account, whatever they submitted. And that registrar decided, yes, this is a legit person, they're connected to these accounts, and they have this validator. So check mark, certified. We at least have some information about who they are. That gives us a little bit more confidence that it's not just running off of an anonymous account and going to disappear tomorrow. So the linked green ones, what that means is there is a parent validator that's been approved, and these linked ones, they're running more than one validator, and they're just linking it to their approved account, which makes sense. The grayed out link validator and the grayed out check validators are ones that have applied for with the registrar to get certified, but it hasn't been completed yet. And then just like you'll see on DBC, there's just a little circle with the minus in it. That means they've set an on-chain identity, but they have not submitted to a registrar to get certification. But at this moment, there are no registrars with DBC. Just this morning, I submitted a proposal to the democracy section of dbcwallet.io to add a registrar. So hopefully we'll start seeing some of these other symbols here, and it will help us get a little bit more confident about which validators we're choosing. Now I'm going to scroll down the list here, and you'll see what else you see on DBC right now, which is validators that don't have a name set. They're just the raw account. That is a validator that created an account, set up their validator, and did not set an identity. It's not necessarily bad, but as we were talking about, you have to gauge risk. They haven't identified themselves in any way, and it just seems a little bit more risky to select those validators. So switching back to DBC Wallet, right now the best we can do is go to a validator. We'll just click on a random one, and we can see some information about who they are. This is actually a great one. We have a name, and I recognize that name from Telegram, from the community. I have an email, and we have a Twitter account. That gives me a lot more confidence in selecting this validator because they've identified themselves. They said, community, I'm here. You can contact me. You can reach out with me. I'm running a validator. It's going to be good. And then there's other ones that have nothing or don't even have an identity set. So for now, that's what you want to look at as far as who people are. As we continue to move forward and evolve as a community and on the chain, we should start seeing those registrars, those different symbols, and it's going to give us a lot more confidence. As I mentioned before, we can also look at own stake and total stake, and we can see that some of these have a million or more, and some don't. But that doesn't always mean anything. Some of the validators with own stake are a little bit lower because they moved their rewards over from the test phase, and they have not yet moved their full bag over to stake it against the validator. So it's something to think about, but nothing that you should use as the primary rule of which validator to choose. And then of course this return percentage is really handy. A lot of people ask, what's my percentage? What's my APR? What's my APY? This is handy, but also keep in mind it's based on the numbers that are set right now. If that stake substantially increases, or if the commission changes or anything, this changes daily. So this is kind of a little spot check, and I think it's also based on how much DBC you have in your account. So that's something to look at, but you have to kind of look at everything and then figure out who to trust and how much risk you're willing to take on. And just one more thing, we're going to click over to look at a couple of random graphs again, just for some validators. And we mentioned commission before. You want to watch and make sure the commission isn't jumping up and down. The other thing you want to look for is slashes. I know I mentioned slashes before, but right here we can see there's arrow points up on the top left. Arrow points are used to calculate what the reward is for that validator. And then you can see the actual earned rewards in DBC go up and down with the amount of points that are earned. All of the validators are a little bit lower than the patterns here because more validators were just added each day. So there's going to be a little bit of a drop at first, but that should come back up. What you really want is to look over here at the red dots. Those are slashes. So if this validator were slashed anytime recently, you'd see a little bump up on the chart and then back down. So that's a good sign, no slashes. You can also go back and hit the slashes tab, and there's nothing listed here, but any validators that were recently slashed would be showing up right here. The other thing I can do from this targets tab is, as I'm evaluating the different validators, choose which ones I want to nominate and just select this little checkbox. And once I've selected a few that I like, I'll just go up, hit nominate selected, and this will start the process for nominating them. You can also do this through account actions, but it's nice that you can do it right here. That's going to run for a second. Okay, so I am now nominating both of these validators. You can see the little hand symbol has showed up to the left of them, and they're both selected. So tomorrow, with my new selections, those will be considered when the algorithm runs to figure out which validator will be most profitable for my stake. If you have any other questions, feel free to post them in the comments down below. You can always find me on Telegram in the main DeepBrain chain channel. This is Brandon, or Crazy6, signing off. Thanks.